Compared to other European cities, Berlin, less than 800 years old, is considered a young city, yet without a doubt its fairly short history makes it unique. Berlin is a city of social and architectural experimentation, starting with Prussia's famous master builders and continuing to the modern era and the architects who worked here after the wall came down. The construction of the Berlin Wall began early in the morning of Sunday, August 13, 1961. It was a desperate and effective move by the German Democratic Republic to stop East Berliners escaping from the Soviet-controlled East German state into the west of the city, which was then occupied by the Americans, British and French. Though the west side of the Berlin Wall was once a popular meeting point for graffiti sprayers, nowadays many famous graffiti artists have left their mark on the east side of the longest preserved section of the wall. 118 artists from 21 countries have painted pictures on a 1,316-metre-long section of the Berlin Wall, which is now a listed landmark. Checkpoint Charlie is one of the most symbolic memorials of the divided city. It was the best-known border crossing of Cold War days. It's today an iconic marker of territorial boundary and political division. Until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, it signified the border between West and East, capitalism and communism, freedom and confinement. The spot remains a must-see site in Berlin, with huge historical and emotional resonance. Berlin's Holocaust Memorial, located in Mitte on a stretch of the former death strip where the wall once stood near the Brandenburg Gate, is Berlin's stunning monument to the Holocaust, dedicated to the Jewish victims of the Nazi genocide of World War II. The internationally renowned New York architect Peter Eisenman designed a field of stele, 2,711 concrete blocks of different heights, structured in a grid system and covering nearly 19,000 square meters of gently sloping ground. Impressive in its awesome grey soberness rather than somberness, the monument is open day and night, and it's possible to walk through the concrete slabs at one's own pace. Even though the destruction of war and many years as a divided city meant that Berlin had the unique opportunity after the wall came down to completely redesign entire neighborhoods and building ensembles in city central districts, architecturally exciting projects have also been implemented at different locations as solitary urban jewels. The best way to explore Berlin's unique atmosphere is from the inside, whether on foot or by bike. Visitors watched a skyline of construction cranes rise over the metropolis and marveled at the awesome commitment to knitting together a city divided for 50 years. Berlin audaciously tried to reconcile its tragic past with a new vision of the urban future. The city placed the realization of this grand ambition in the hands of architects, an opportunity unequaled since the great rebuilding projects after World War II. Important museums and public buildings were erected or rebuilt. Following German reunification on October 3, 1990, the Bundestag, the German federal parliament, decided 1 year later to make the Reichstag the seat of parliament in Berlin, the restored capital of reunited Germany. After a complete restoration of Paul Wallert's original 1894 building, the Bundestag reconvened here in Sir Norman Foster's spectacularly restored Reichstag building in 1999. The original Reichstag building was completed in 1894 following German national unity and the establishment of the German Reich in 1871. The building's grandeur was accentuated by an imposing projecting columned entrance supporting a triangular gable and a wide flight of steps that must be climbed to reach the main entrance portal. Under the attentive eye of Kaiser Wilhelm II, Paul Wallert's Reichstag competition winner of 1882 was a synthesis of high Renaissance and classical motifs. The 6-story complex in the style of the Italian High Renaissance covers an area of about 13,290 square meters, and its 4 towers are 40 meters high. The famous inscription to the German nation, a 1916 edition by Peter Behrens, still towers above the monumental entrance. After reunification and the Bundestag's move from Bonn to Berlin, it became necessary to equip and thoroughly modernize the languishing building. The Bundestag voted for a slightly more conservative reconstruction of the original dome in modern guise. The Reichstag's new dome or cupola, with its vast central glass cylinder, is amongst the most impressive features visually and technically designed to reflect natural light into the plenary chamber. It provides natural ventilation and light with a mirror system which directs light inside the chamber during the day and reflects it back at night. The steel dome structure, with a diameter of 38 meters at the base and a height of 24 meters, is a token of the renewal of a building that's otherwise little changed outwardly. The roof of the Reichstag and the dome offer 360-degree views of sprawling Berlin. Few cities have seen as many changes over recent years as Berlin. The 2 separate entities that existed before the wall came down have become one again. The city of Berlin offers an impressive and fascinating history, as well as breathtaking modern sculptures. Berlin is is one of the greenest capital cities in Europe. Parks and wooded areas can all be found in the city. They're ideal for relaxing between touring the city and visiting museums. Expressionist style Bundeskanzleramt is one of a complex of buildings situated around the Reichstag, the seat of the German parliament, built to house government institutions following the relocation of the German capital from Bonn to Berlin. The building was designed by architect Axel Schulz. With 9 stories, it has a height of 36 meters and a total floor area of about 12,000 square meters, making it one of the largest governmental headquarters in the world. With the Bundestag's 1995 decision to move the federal government from Bonn to Berlin, the new construction of government buildings was a necessity. With the exception of the Reichstag, the old government district between the Tiergarten and the Spree River was left in rubble after the Second World War. This left much room for the ideas of well-known architects to construct modern, prestigious government buildings that are adapted to the standards of today and the needs of tomorrow. There are more than 2,500 public parks and gardens in Berlin, and almost a fifth of the city is covered with trees. Tiergarten in Berlin refers to the parliamentary government and diplomatic district, as well as to Berlin's largest and most popular inner-city park. The Tiergarten Animal Park and former hunting ground is Berlin's best-known park because of its centrality. It's a favourite with locals and visitors. Wonderful for a stroll, a breath of fresh air, a picnic, cycling or a jog, or just kicking a ball around. Today the area includes the Regierungsviertel, Potsdamer Platz and the Kulturforum, as well as the Diplomatenviertel. The first avenues were arranged in the late 17th century, gaining increasingly refined touches under the influence of the French-inspired gardens for entertainment and leisure. The English influence became fashionable in the early 19th century, and the original designs by prominent landscape architect Peter Joseph Lenn have lasted until today. In 1818, Lenn was commissioned to transform the green area into a landscaped park. Berliners make good use of the park for outdoor activities. Sports and football games and barbecues on Sundays are very popular. Public parks, green strips, waterways and city squares of various shapes and sizes characterize Green Berlin and provide a variety of recreational opportunities in the city. The 2.5 square kilometre Tiergarten is the largest park in the city. Its more than 23 kilometres of pathways make it popular with those looking for a leisurely place to stroll. For many years, however, the park wasn't open to the public. It began its life as the preferred hunting ground for the electors of Brandenburg. It was Friedrich I, the first Prussian king, who opened the park to the general public. The National Memorial to Prince Bismarck is one of the most intriguing in the city. Bismarck is shown in his cuirassier's uniform, as he was wont to appear in the old Reichstag. 4 groups encircle the base of the pedestal. Unfortunately, much of the park was decimated during World War II. Since the beginning of 1994, Bellevue Palace in Berlin has been the official residence of the federal president. Located in the midst of the Tiergarten, right on the banks of the Spree and close to Victory Column, the Bundestag and the Brandenburg Gate, Bellevue Palace is situated in the center of Berlin. The palace was commissioned by the younger brother of Friedrich II, Ferdinand of Prussia, built and was finished in 1786. His plan is a two-story, three-winged structure consisting of a long main building and two wings. On the left, the women's wing, on the right, the Spree wing, designed in the early classical style. Rustling waves, green forests, nature, rejuvenation and peace, that too is Berlin. Because all around the city of over 1 million residents, a unique landscape is situated with large parks.
There is always a time for everything, just neither a sign.
Berlin's Victory Column is another of Berlin's monuments that's reinvented itself through the ages. From the symbol of Prussian military victory in the 19th century to that of Berlin's thriving gay community and favourite tourist spot today. The column is an interesting example of allegorical representations linking German traditional mythological symbols to its imperial days. The 8.3-metre high statue on the top of the column represents both Victoria, the goddess of victory, and Borussia, the allegorical and Latin name of Prussia.
Just for your hope, carrying forward to want. You have to remember
a Soviet war
trust
memorial
your soul.
can also be found along June the 17th Street.
You're falling apart.
It's flanked by Red Army artillery and two T-34 tanks.
Be brave, make it real.
A bronze statue of a triumphant Red Army soldier stands on the central pylon. The monument, a concave colonnade of 6 joined axes, was allegedly erected with red marble and granite and transported here from the ruins of Hitler's imperial chancellery. It commemorates the 80,000 Soviet dead who fell during the Battle of Berlin in 1945.
The breeze of this care for another soul.
The Brandenburg Gate is one of Berlin's most important monuments, a landmark and symbol all in one, with over 200 years of history. When Germany was reunified following the fall of Berlin in November 1989, the Brandenburg Gate quickly reinvented itself into the new Berlin symbol of unity. The Brandenburg Gate was erected between 1788 and 1791, according to designs by Karl Gotthard Langhans, whose vision was inspired by the Propylaeon in Athens' Acropolis. Prussian sovereign Friedrich Wilhelm II was looking for a suitable architectural statement to enhance the approach into the Unter den Linden Boulevard. The classical sandstone work is one of the masterpieces of this era and is the only surviving one of 18 previous city portals. It has 5 passages. Each single pillar is 11 meters deep and has a Doric column of sandstone in front of it. On both sides of the gate were gate lodges. Of course, the king expected a representative and monumental building. The width averages 65 meters and its altitude comes up to 26 meters. Only the imperial family were allowed to drive through the middle passage of the Brandenburg Gate until 1918, when the Emperor Wilhelm II abdicated. quadriga, a sculpture representing the goddess of victory by Johann Gottfried Schadow, which can be spotted from a long distance, was erected on the gate in 1793.
Be brave, make it real. Try singing a gospel, and there's always a time.
The Platz is the square on the eastern side of the Brandenburg Gate. It was originally laid out between 1732 and 1734 as part of Berlin's second Baroque expansion outwards from the historical city centre. Two additional important landmarks just to the side of the gate are the Platz with the restored American Embassy and the Academy of Arts and its modernist glass facade. Already in the 19th century, the central boulevard Unter den Linden, which means under the linden trees, was Berlin's most splendid promenade and parade street. Even today, the avenue hasn't lost any of its old charm. Initially it was a bridle path, which from 1573 onwards led from the city palace to Lizzo, and then later onto Charlottenburg Palace, which was named after Queen Sophie Charlotte, and from there all the way to Spandau. Starting in 1701, Unter den Linden was beautified with the help of royal pomp and new architecture. Duke Friedrich Wilhelm, also known as the Great Elector, was dedicated to the development and beautification of Berlin during his reign in the mid-1600s. In order to spruce up the route from his castle home to the Tiergarten hunting ground, it's said that Friedrich ordered the planting of long rows of linden trees, which would also serve to keep the route more shady and comfortable for his travels. That means his carriage ride would have him travelling unter den Linden, literally under the lindens. In the course of time, the armoury and Friedrichstadt were added, and under the rule of Frederick the Great, important buildings were built. Carl Friedrich Schinkel's great architectural achievement was to bring together the various buildings and styles present, so as to create a unifying aesthetic concept. On the basis of this, taken together, they formed an aesthetic ensemble centred around Unter den Linden. After the Second World War, Unter den Linden was a desert of rubble. That is, with the exception of the city castle. In 1950, however, the General Secretary of the Central Committee of the said, Walter Ulbricht, blew up the city castle because he regarded it as a symbol of Prussian absolutism. The other surviving buildings were gradually reconstructed. The focus on history, memory, and on urban identity can strike the outsider as an obsessive kind of inner reflection, but it's part of a genuine transformation. People see these buildings as expressions of the force of history rather than as about themselves. Friedrich II expanded the boulevard by adding his collection of cultural buildings to the area, including the Berlin State Opera House and the State Library. In 1701, the library was renamed the Royal Library at Berlin and kept this name until the end of the German monarchy in 1918. One statue still standing today is the impressive equestrian statue of Friedrich II. The massive bronze monument was created between 1839 and 1851 by Christian Daniel Rauch. Berlin's elegant boulevard is found in the old heart of Berlin, going all the way from the Brandenburg Gate to the Schlossbrock Bridge. On the boulevard Unter den Linden, there are many important institutions, such as the Humboldt University and the State Opera, as well as attractions such as the UCM.ONE Memorial and the Armory. Berlin's oldest university, completed in 1766, is located in a former royal palace. Its illustrious student body and professors once included the father of German idealism and the dialectic, philosopher Hegel, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. The UCM.ONE Memorial has been the main memorial site for the victims of war and tyranny since 1993. About 180 museums, a vibrant gallery scene, top-class special exhibitions and renowned auction houses. Berlin is a mecca for lovers of art. Berlin's museum landscape is as vital as Berlin itself. No other city lives and breathes history as Berlin does. This is where history left particularly deep marks on its streets, squares and buildings. They tell the stories of little and large events in the city's history. The many history museums of the city explain backgrounds and connections. Berlin's Museum Island is the northern tip of Spree Island, and it's also a magnificent work of art itself, involving 5 world-renowned museums gathered in an extraordinary ensemble. Since 1999, the museum has been the only architectural and cultural ensemble that's considered part of World Heritage by UNESCO. Like an ancient temple, the Alt National Gallery Museum, along with its stairway, rises above Museum Island. The model that inspired the architect Friedrich August Stiller was the Acropolis of Athens. It was the first museum to be renovated here and has been open to the public since 2001. Built between 1867 and 1876, the building features works of Classicism, Romanticism, the Biedermeier era, Impressionism and early Modernism. The Alts Museum, built between 1823 and 1830, is one of the most important works in the architecture of Classicism. With a lucidly ordered exterior and an interior structure of great precision after the ancient Greek style, Schinkel pursued Humboldt's idea of the museum as an educational institution open to the public. The consortium of museums found on Museum Island forms a unique cultural centre. Berlin Cathedral, completed in 1905, is Berlin's largest and most important Protestant church, as well as the sepulchre of the Prussian Hohenzollern dynasty. This outstanding high Renaissance Baroque monument has linked the Hohenzollerns to German Protestantism for centuries and undergone renewed phases of architectural renovation since the Middle Ages. First built in 1465 as a parish church on the Spree River, it was only finally completed in 1905 under the last German Kaiser, Wilhelm II. Damaged during the Second World War, it remained closed during the GDR years and reopened after restoration in 1993. When Wilhelm II ascended the throne, he authorized the demolition of the old cathedral, and construction began in 1893 of the much larger, imposing present Berliner Dom. The outer facades and the inner walls were richly painted with scenes from the New Testament and from the time of the Reformation. The Hohenzollerns justified these overdimensions with their gratitude for divine grace. The old cathedral at the Lustgarten was initially constructed between 1747 and 1750 under Friedrich the Great as a Baroque church. From 1817 to 1822, Carl Friedrich Schinkel redesigned it, but the cathedral retained its stylistic similarity to the high Renaissance Baroque architecture of St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. Finally, official plans reconciling the different stages and stylistic developments were presented by Julius Raschdorf to King Friedrich Wilhelm IV. Once inside, looking up towards the ceiling, there's a striking dome with exquisite paintings. One of the other notable artworks includes Sauer's organ. The church was divided into three areas: baptismal and wedding church, sermon church and monument church, where among others the treasures and monuments of the Hohenzollerns, the emperor's family, were to be found. The neo-Baroque pulpit was designed by Anton von Werner. The main altar dates from 1850. The lower row of windows shows the birth, crucifixion, and resurrection of Jesus. The altar windows were destroyed during the war and reconstructed in the years 1987 to 1997. The upper row of windows represents the Christian conceptions of faith, hope, and charity. Berlin's churches stand mainly for its historical importance and beautiful architecture. Alex de Berliners, a cattle market in the Middle Ages, a military parade square and an exercise ground for nearby barracks until the mid-19th century, Alexanderplatz is the square named to honour Alexander I, Tsar of Russia, on his visit to Berlin in 1805. Layer upon layer of Berlin's urban history is located in Alexanderplatz, interweaving centuries of social, political, and architectural history, and repeatedly the subject of public debate and urban design competitions. The Marienkirche is the only reminder that a market quarter, including its own church, was established here in the late 13th century, the first medieval urban expansion of Berlin. The buildings that grew up around the Marienkirche over the following centuries were destroyed during the war. The late Gothic brick church has survived to this day in its historical form. Berlin-Roth's Rathaus, literally Red Town Hall, is the seat of the Berlin Senate city government as opposed to local district government, which is housed in the district town halls. To the west of Alexanderplatz, a large square comes into view at the foot of Berlin's TV tower, with flower beds, benches and fountains. There, a meticulously constructed forum was built in the 60s to provide the new capital with an attractive location to linger and mingle. Amongst the sights to look out for here are the 365-metre TV tower, Berlin's highest construction, topped by a globe with a rotating viewing platform. In Potsdam, the royal seat of the Brandenburg Prussian rulers, master builders and artists created a fascinating ensemble of palaces, parks and gardens in the space of only 3 centuries. The initial ideas on incorporating the surrounding lakes and hills into the future picture of the city were already developed during the construction of the Potsdam City Palace. However, it wasn't until the 19th century that the idea of Potsdam as a paradise isle became a reality, thanks to the landscape architect Peter Joseph Lenn. He united the various palaces and parks into a unique park landscape, which was designated as a World Cultural Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1990. At the western end of the main promenade in Sanssouci Park, known as the Hauptallee, rises a monumental palace building, the New Palace, whose high timbre or drummed cupola is recognizable from a great distance. The city of Potsdam is known especially as having once been the favorite residence of the Prussian kings in the 18th and 19th centuries. However, the eventful history of this place is much older. Traces of human life have been found from times as old as the beginning of the Stone Age, 12,000 years ago. The Roman entrenchment near Sacro was built in the Bronze Age about 3,000 years ago and is one of Europe's oldest military constructions. During the 12th and 13th centuries, the Germans occupied and settled in the region between the Elbe and Oder rivers. At the end of the 12th century, the German Potsdam is thought to have been built by Magdeburg rulers as a military settlement. A square castle tower, built of stone close to a Havel River ford, became the centre of that settlement, located near today's Langbach Bridge. It wasn't until 1317 that a second document makes reference to Potsdam, this time referring to a small medieval town with a central marketplace with a church and cemetery surrounded by some houses. Potsdam first became important in the 17th century when Prince Friedrich William decided that the city of Berlin didn't provide sufficient scope for his desired level of prestige. In Potsdam, he saw a remarkably fine location with wide-branching usable waterways surrounded by rolling arable land. Therefore, he began consolidating his property in Potsdam from 1657 as the basis for building a second royal seat alongside the traditional court in Berlin. In 1660, construction started to convert the old medieval castle into a palace. In 1685, Friedrich William issued the Edict of Potsdam, by which he opened his country to the Huguenots, who'd been expelled from France. When Friedrich the Great assumed the throne in 1740, he started a centuries-long transformation of the Potsdam landscape. After the 7-Year War, from 1763 to 1769, Friedrich the Great built the largest of Potsdam's palaces, the New Palace, in Sanssouci Park, as a sign of strength and confidence. The north and south auxiliary wings are crowned with domes surmounted by gilded eagles. Between the pilasters, what appears to be brick is actually a painted effect, leaving only the south wing with exposed brick. The captivating architecture of this former Prussian royal seat and the elegant air of the history that still hangs over its parks and gardens prove a quiet moment for millions of visitors who descend upon the town each year. Sanssouci Park was originally nothing more than a terraced garden, which Friedrich the Great had planted in 1744 to cultivate plums, figs and vines on a hill just outside the gates of Potsdam. Because the view was so beautiful, the king had a summer residence built above the terraces just 1 year later. In the following years, more palace buildings were blended into the gentle hill landscape, while the slopes were used for ornamental and vegetable gardens. The Baroque garden was no longer in fashion during the reigns of Frederick the Great's successors. It was redesigned in the style of a landscaped park and extended by Frederick William IV. The palaces and gardens of Berlin and the province of Brandenburg bear witness to the artistic, cultural, and architectural history of the region. The stately Chinese house in the deer garden of Sanssouci Park is an impressive example of the widespread fashion and fascination with China, which influenced the cultural tastes of Europe's royal courts in the 18th century. It's a charming and exotic garden pavilion, shaped in the form of a clover leaf, Very near to Sanssouci Palace, Frederick William II had the old adjustable windmill replaced by a larger windmill based on a Dutch model that included a stone foundation and a gallery. No other palace is more closely connected with the personality of Frederick the Great than Sanssouci. Sanssouci, without a worry, was the French name of his palace, though thanks to considerable care taken by its architect George Wenceslaus von Nobelsdorf, craftsmen and artisans, it's hailed as Germany's Versailles. Frederick II was the inspiration for Sanssouci. The architect von Nobelsdorf, for whom the king was both friend and patron, owed Frederick II his training in Rome, Venice, Florence, Dresden and Paris. The architect seems to have been amenable to the desires of his royal patron, whose concern was for both splendour and simplicity. The iconographic programme reflects these paradoxes. To evoke a vine-grower's house, the southern facade was punctuated with 36 Bacchant and Bacchante by the sculptor Gloom. The secondary side wings on the garden front are screened by two symmetrical rows of trees, each terminating in freestanding, trellised gazebos, richly decorated with gilded ornaments. Opposite the palace's westward opening court of honour are the communes, designed by Carl von Gontard and Jean-Laurent Leguet. Styled in the same manner as the palace itself, the two buildings house the royal kitchens, utilities, gardeners' shops, palace guards and servants. Between the two buildings stretches a curved colonnade, decorated with statuary and obelisks, which acted as a state entrance as well as a screen to shield the view of the marshlands beyond. The ensemble of the chateaux and parks of Potsdam is an exceptional artistic achievement whose eclectic and evolutional features reinforce its uniqueness. A series of architectural and landscaping masterpieces have been built within a single space, illustrating opposing and reputedly irreconcilable styles without detracting from the harmony of the general composition, designed progressively over time.